These past 2 weeks have been kind of a rough spot for me with my book. What I'm doing is I don't talk much about what my book is about, but it's about the monarchy of a fictional European country. And I'm going for realism, something believable, something that could actually happen. This is a country that could really exist, which means it needs detail and it needs a fully fleshed out history in order for the story to seem believable, and because that will inform the present. The thing about a lot of monarchies is that they tend to have fairly well recorded family histories. Most people's family history is a mystery. You have to employ special researchers and genealogists and stuff. But when it's a royal family, their history is always very well recorded, which means it wasn't very realistic of me to not have my fictional family tree also very densely recorded as well. I thought it might seem a little strange if there's not that many references to ancestors and to previous kings and princes and things like that. And also, I didn't just want to make it up as I went along, just dropping people in here and there. I wanted to actually know what the history was. I wanted to have it all worked out like an encyclopedia, like it's real history, so that I can work from that, and so that it all is consistent and none of it contradicts itself. And that meant working out the family tree of my royal family way back to the country's beginning. Now, luckily, I know when the country was established, so I did know how far back it has to go, but also when I don't really need to know much about it. Once we get to a certain period of history, I don't really need to go back any further. So that at least was one thing that I knew. That made it a bit easier because I knew um, what the extent of it had to be. However, the problem was that when I actually got into researching European family trees, the family trees of European royal families, it's very complicated. It's very complicated because they all intersect with each other. Royal families will sort of crossbreed. All the current reigning monarchs of Europe, excluding the Pope, who isn't really, I don't really consider the Pope to be a real monarch. Really, it's an elected thing. I mean, I get that technically he is, but just apart from him, all the hereditary reigning monarchs of Europe are all cousins and first cousins and second cousins of each other, etc. So, what I decided to do was to start with that as it exists and to try and find a common starting point. And there is a common ancestor that they all share. It's a person who's called Louis the Ninth, Margrave of Hesse Darmstadt. Now, I don't really know what a Margrave is, and I don't really know much about Hesse or Darmstadt, but I know he's the common ancestor. Every current reigning European monarch is descended from him, and his descendants all mixed with different European royal families. He's known as the father-in-law of Europe, like how Queen Victoria is known as the grandmother of Europe. Actually, no. I'm thinking of Christian the Ninth is the grandfather of is the father-in-law of Europe. I think. I don't know. It's all very complicated, and I'm still in the process of researching everything. But what I'm doing is I found a software for making family trees, and I'm using that, working from primary sort of how do I put it? Working directly, one at a time, generation by generation. I'm mapping out his descendants and who they married and who their children were, so that eventually I'll get to all the current reigning monarchs of Europe. And once I've done that, I'm then going to add in Queen Victoria and her descendants, and I'm going to add in Christian IX and his descendants. Then what I'm going to do is the second part of that, where I take all the current reigning monarchs of Europe and I then work backwards, mapping their relationships to their predecessors all the way back to the year that my fictional country was established, irrespective of how those people connect with Louis IX, the Landgrave of Hesse and Darmstadt. If any of this is making any sense whatsoever, that's currently what I'm in the middle of. And it means I'm not getting any actual writing done, but I think this is an important part of the research process, because what I'm going for is verisimilitude. If this country really existed in Europe and it had a monarchy, it would have a royal family, and their family tree will be traced back hundreds of years, and you can research the whole thing, and that would intersect with other European royal families, so that the current king of this country is, like all the other European monarchs, a cousin to all of the other ones. So that's what I'm currently doing. The thing is, though, what none of this will do is the more difficult part, which is figuring out the fictional members of the family. Because I'm thinking, and I don't know that this is true yet, but I'm thinking, if Louis IX, if not all of his children are a direct ancestor of a European monarch, what I could do is take one of them that isn't and sort of make that where I insert my fictional royal family, have them get married to a previous king of this country, or one of their children does. That is how I can connect it. And I think it's that kind of real historical accuracy that I'm going for. But even after that, I'm going to have to decide for myself who the fictional members are, how many children they had, how many of them survived to adulthood, that sort of thing. How many heirs did accede in the end? How many died before then? Hopefully I'll come up with a way of doing it. I might have to do a bit of research into different historical events, like you've got the Spanish influenza, for instance. You've got all sorts of like wars and things, and a lot of diseases were much deadlier and much more common and things, and like mortality rates were much higher and life expectancy was much lower. Hopefully I'll be able to figure it out. But what I might do is sort of compare my royal family's generations with the real generations that match them on the real family tree that exists now, and say, okay, was there a theme here? Because those people, those cousins, will have existed at broadly the same time. They will probably have been affected by the same events. That kind of thing. I don't really know what I'm doing. And also, while I'm doing all of this, my manuscript is just languishing. And I'm not adding anything to it. But I'm the kind of writer, I can't continue writing until I know this stuff. And I don't even know how useful any of it's going to be to the story that I'm telling now about the present. But I think it's necessary, because I just have that kind of sort of process. That's the way I work. I need to get through this part of the process before I can keep writing, and I don't really know why that is. And hopefully I'll sort it out sooner or later, and then I can get back to the writing process. But I think if I actually manage to figure out a way of doing this and getting the result that I want, it's gonna suddenly open up the world of this story and the history of this country, and it's going to tell me all sorts of things about who my main characters' relatives are in the real world and who their ancestors were historically. That's what I have to do. See, writing is kind of like a puzzle, or at least that's the way I approach it. The puzzle is like the challenge I've been given by myself is to write a story about the royal family of a fictional European country and to make it believable and to make it real, to seem like it exists in the world today and has been there for as long as those other countries have. That's the challenge I've given myself. And I think maybe the challenge is sort of the whole point of the story. I think the story is maybe just an excuse to do all of this. And I don't know why, but I think really the book itself is just the end result of a whole bunch of other things. Because I've always been fascinated with history, especially European history. And maybe this book is actually the manifestation of my desire to learn about all of this. And that the book is just sort of a bonus. That's the thing I get out of it, to prove that I did it. But the book is not its own point, possibly. I don't know. I really don't know. But I'm okay with that. I'm really kind of calm right now, and I feel like I'm in control. Because for like the past 2 weeks, I've been telling myself it's far too complicated to do. There's no way I can figure this out, and if I can't do that, why should I bother writing this story at all? It's simply impossible. I'm too weak. I don't have it in me to do this. But I decided, like, after 2 weeks of making no progress on it, that I may as well just get on with it and see what happens. And so I started with the simplest thing, researching, do they all have a common ancestor? Is there one person who is known to be the direct ancestor of all the current reigning monarchs of Europe? And I've gone from there. And I guess I'll see what happens. But that's just how it works for me. I sort of have a crisis and I let it get to me for a bit. And then eventually I get sick of being in crisis. And so I decide I'll try something. Why don't we just start with the simplest starting point and go from there? And I don't know if this has revealed anything of interest at all, or if this has provided any insight to other people about writing. But this is really for me, and I'm a lot happier with where I was. I'm a lot happier with where I am now than where I was 2 weeks ago. And I think if this works, what I'm doing now, it could be one of the coolest things I've ever done. And it could be one of my best achievements as a writer, to figure out exactly how I do this. Like I'm retconning history, like I'm inserting an entire dynasty into real history and making it consistent with the rest of it. I personally think this could be really cool, even if nobody else does. It's suddenly gone very quiet.
used to it being.